Thank you for joining us for the introduction for the unit on understanding terminations and connections of conductors. It's one of the units of the Electrotechnical Award and it's a technical unit. City and Guilds, it's 5375, unit number 107, and EL, it's 7345, unit NETK3/05. Both units are level 3 and part of the Electrotechnical Award. Let's take a look at the aim of this unit. This unit is designed to enable learners to understand and interpret the principles, practices, and legislation associated with the termination and connection of conductors and cables in electrical systems. Its content is the knowledge needed by a learner to underpin the application of skills for terminating and connecting conductors and cables in electrical systems in accordance with statutory and non-statutory regulations. This unit then is about you as a learner having an understanding of what is required legally to be able to do the work that you're doing in relation to terminating. The assessment of it comes in two parts. The first part is a practical assessment. Practical assessment, you will be given details of an assessment that you need to put together, various circuits, various types, to test the experience that you've got in the areas relating to different types of cables, etc. You'll be expected to do terminations with it to make sure that terminations are sound, safe, and comply with current standards. To supplement that, you have some oral or written questions, depending how the centre and the awarding body decides to implement that aspect of it. So you'll be given short knowledge questions for you to complete in relation to terminations and how you should terminate. Let's take a look then at the learning outcomes in relation to this unit. Let's take a look at learning outcome number 1. This is about understanding the regulatory requirements and procedures for terminating and connecting conductors and cables in electrical wiring systems and equipment. The assessment criteria is in two parts. Firstly, to identify and interpret appropriate sources of relevant information for the termination and connection of conductors and cables in electrical wiring systems and equipment. So when you're working on a project, you'll be given lots of things that you're terminating over that period of time. It's about you being able to understand the documentation you require to make sure that them terminations are correctly completed. Number 2, describe methods and procedures appropriate to the installation environment to ensure the safe and effective termination and connection of conductors and cables in electrical wiring system and equipment. So this is about understanding the methods that you need to do for that particular terminations or series of terminations that you're undertaking. The range for this unit comes into a lot of different areas. You may not realise, but there's lots of documentation that you use that's there for you to assisting you in your completion of the task. So you need to understand statutory documents, codes of practice, British standards, BS 7671, 18th edition regulations currently, manufacturer's instructions, installation specifications. All of these are relevant and you need to understand in relation to how you use them for assisting you in termination. Continuing on with the range, we have wiring systems and equipment. So you need to understand about single and multi-core thermosetting insulated cables, including flexible cables. single and multi-core thermoplastic PVC insulated cables including flexible cables, PVC flat profile cable, MICC with and without PVC sheath, SWA cables, XPLE and PVC, armoured braided flexible cables, data cables, fibre optic cables and fire performance cables. So for them cables you need to understand what the methods are and how you should safely use them and select them for the environment that you're going to be using them in. Learning outcome 2 moves into understanding the procedures and applications of different methods of terminating, connecting and supporting conductors and cables in electrical wiring systems and equipment. So this outcome is looking at how you decide what terminations you're going to use and how you support the terminations and the cables with various types of containment and support systems that you would use. The assessment criteria comes in a number of areas. First, number 1, explain the advantages, limitations and applications of the following connection methods. So you need to understand what limitations you have, what are the advantages, and when you would use these methods that are listed. So A, screw technique, B, crimped cables, C, soldering, D, non-screw compression, and E, installation displacement. You need to be able to, for number 2, describe the procedures for verifying the termination and connections are electrically and mechanically sound. For number 3, explain the consequences of terminations not being electrically sound in terms of A, high resistant joints, and B, corrosion and erosion. For number 4, you need to be able to interpret and apply the techniques and methods for safe and effective termination and connection of the following listed cables. A, flexible cables. B, single and multi-core thermoplastic PVC and thermosetting insulated cables. PVC flat profile cable. MICC. SWA cables. Galvanized steel wire braid, data cables and high performance cables. So you need to demonstrate an understanding of all of them areas. We also look at safe, as in safety of what you're doing as part of the range elements, which looks at selection and use of tools, PPE, your understanding of what PPE is required for the task that you're undertaking, risk assessment, making sure that when you're doing the job you've assessed it and it's assessed it's safe to do that work, reporting of unsafe situations so that you know the procedures to report if something is not safe to continue the termination process, adherence to relevant statutory and non-statutory regulations, so what you need to apply to and what you need to do to be safe. The range continues with effective support methods. So you need to understand about supporting with things like PVC conduit, metal trunking, metal tray. What is the appropriate method to support and when you would use it in what type of installation. Supporting information, practical activity. Given the safety critical nature of this topic, it's a requirement that learners have knowledge consolidation by the use of practical support learning. The activity comes in simulated conditions and you may need your tutor or assessor to support you numerous times in practicing in various different parts of the understanding to do with terminations. This will depend on your experience based on the company that you're working with and doing your apprenticeship through. Assessment criteria 4.5 is supported by learning outcomes from the unit, understanding design and installation practices and procedures. This is where you're obviously selecting types of cabling, and this evidence comes into this unit and is assessed against it. So completion of this unit comes with that unit also being completed. In the delivery of this unit, an emphasis shall be made to the learner on the necessity to keep up to date with the latest standards, technologies and practices which relate to and affect the topics covered in this unit. This is in keeping with good engineering practice. This means you need to keep up to date with changes that are happening in current guidance, such as BS 7671 wiring regulations. That concludes our introduction on understanding termination and connections of conductors on the Electrotechnical Award. City and Guilds will be 5375 Unit 107 and EL will be 7345 Unit NET K305. And remember, them units or numbers could change as the qualifications develop. Thanks for taking your time for watching this and hope you find it useful. Thanks very much.